We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Line Movement. It is Wild Card Weekend. We were just talking about it. We've had a couple shows throughout this week to kind of break down, I guess, the macro of some of these games and then kind of get some strategy stuff going on. Of course, the playoffs is a much different time of year. So we're going to actually do this segment a tad differently, but I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. We're going to actually talk through the most important, interesting, potentially high-scoring game of the entire week. One game from Saturday, one game from Sunday. So we've done the macro. We've kind of done our first look at a lot of these games, a lot of these players. But the good news is I'm not alone to get deep in the weeds. I've got Rich Hribar with me. Of course, he's our weekly guest on the Joe Holka Show. He's author of the worksheet at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Follow him on Twitter at Lord Reeves. I don't even know why I say that, Reeves. I'm sure most people watching this do follow you on Twitter. You're a much better follower on Twitter than I am. But how's it going, man? You ready to talk some playoff football?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never know, man. Your YouTube channel is growing. You never know who finds stuff through there that doesn't, particularly likes to read content or a wall of text. And they might be seeing me on there. I appreciate it still, throwing it out there. But
sure.
yeah, I mean, I kind of figure out what we were going to do for this. It's like, are we going to talk about all 6 games? And you were like, man, I don't have 3 hours. So we pick out one from each to talk about. And it's a bummer because of the way this weekend shakes out. They're probably 2 of the more chalky games. They'll be popular, but maybe I can come up with some reasons maybe why you would fade a popular play or just say like, yeah, I'm just going to go all in and hit the lock button on someone.
Yeah, this game, or I guess this weekend, scares me a little bit overall off the top, Reeves. Like getting into this like a little bit deeper, like the 2 games are pretty obvious for the people that have dove in so far. But both of these games, there's heavy action on the under so far. Also, both of these games are the first game of the day, which is kind of the opposite of what I normally like. I like the chalk to be later so that you can kind of get weird or get, I guess, weird in the beginning and figure it out based on how your lineups are doing. So I honestly don't really like the way that Wild Card Weekend shapes up, at least from a DFS perspective. But we'll get there, man. I think that this is playoff football is always a lot of fun these weeks. I'm just ready to move forward with these ones. You get to get a little bit more in the weeds. So we'll be doing some showdown stuff throughout the week as well, where you're really in the weeds. But I'm excited to chat. We'll do like a favorite bet type of thing for each of these games also. But let's get into it, man. So starting on Saturday, we mentioned it. Both of these games are the first games of the day. We've got the number 7 Colts at the number 2 Bills. This is on the Saturday slate, 1 p.m. Eastern time, a 51-point over-under. The Bills are actually 6.5-point favorites in this one at home per blitzbet.eu. It's the second highest total of the slate, highest total on the Saturday slate, of course, but the Bills also have the second highest team total of Wild Card Weekend. So that's a mouthful there, but 75% of the money is on Buffalo so far, only 64% of the betting tickets though. So not a ton to grab there. Seems like the public and the sharps seem to be on Buffalo in this one, but what were your thoughts on it overall?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Bills, who are arguably the league's hottest team. I mean, hotter than the Chiefs even, coming into the playoffs. I mean, they're 9-1 their past 10 games. The only loss was the Hail Murray. They'd be on a 10-game win streak. I mean, over that span, they lead the league in points scored, just under 35 per game. Since their Week 11 bye, they lead the league in point differential. They've just been flambeing teams. Even in playing their guys a half last week, they scored 50 points total last week. Even in a game where they don't even fully go all out. They're just a team that gets it. I mean, they're aggressive. They throw on first down. Josh Allen, 48.8% of his pass attempts on first down. It's by far the most in the league at the highest rate. And on those downs, he averages 8.9 yards per pass attempt. He's been phenomenal on those. They use play action at a high rate without using their running backs. Novel concept, huh? I mean, the Bills just kind of operate in a capacity I think a lot of us, it's easy to root for. A lot of, us that follow Twitter or on there, like they do some of the things that we wish more teams did, and they're successful at doing it. And they built a team around a player that had some flaws, and they maximized that player, which you don't often see teams do. Go all in on a player and understand his flaws and make him the best player you could possibly be. It doesn't always happen. And if you are a Sam Darnold fan coming out of that same draft, it went the complete opposite direction that has gone for Josh Allen in terms of organizational support. But it starts with Josh Allen. I mean, I have seen Lamar ranked number 1 in a lot of places. I mean, Josh Allen, I just don't see how he's not your number 1 quarterback coming into this game. We talked about that, how the Bills are aggressive. I mean, Josh Allen had 9 top 5 scoring weeks this season. Talking about just a Boku high ceiling, what he's got. The Colts are 12th in the NFL in passing points per game allowed, but Josh Allen had 8 games versus teams that rank higher than the Colts. And in those games, he threw 23 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, multiple passing touchdowns in all of those games, except for the wind game in New England. And he averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game in those games. And then you look at the Colts. Well, since their week 7 bye, they've allowed 7.7 yards, which is over wire. So their season-long stuff masks a lot of the production that they've allowed from the passing stance, early in the season. And the weather looks good so far in this game. We're in the Northeast, so knock on wood, you never know what's going to happen. But the weather looks solid for this game. That's not going to be a big hindrance to go in on this Bills passing game one more time. And we don't really, your boy Diggs, I don't need to really give any real support to anyone that's watched football all season to say play Stephon Diggs. He led the NFL in catches and receiving yards. He's the only wide receiver that have double-digit PPR points in every single game this season. He's got at least 7 catches in 8 straight games heading into the postseason. We saw John Brown come back last week. He caught a touchdown. I mean, his past 3 games have been productive. He's on the field 8 for 99, 6 for 72, 4 for 72 and a touchdown. We might not have a fully healthy Cole Beasley, which could, kind of extenuate, John Brown being a value on the slate. I think he will be a popular play just because he's a cheap attachment to Allen and he falls into that strike zone where we know he's got upside and his price is just right in the middle of kind of where wide receivers are on both sides. But the Colts in totality, when they're allowing 8.9 yards per target to opposing wide receivers, that's 26th in the NFL, and 1.9 PPR points per target, that's 23rd in the NFL. So there's juice to squeeze all around on this Buffalo passing game. We'll have to wait on Beasley. But Beasley's splits with and without John Brown are pretty jarring. I mean, he's only had 16.9% of the targets with John Brown on the field. The one thing that bails him out is that he does have all his touchdowns at 1 with John Brown on the field. And if he doesn't play, I know it'll feel like point chasing, but Isaiah McKenzie was the only other guy outside of Stephon Diggs that ran a route in the slot last week. I know a lot of people will just say, well, Gabriel Davis had been playing. Gabriel Davis was playing for John Brown. So if Cole Beasley were to miss, McKenzie would fill into the slot, and then we'd see them go 10 personnel a good amount because they do run 10 personnel, the second highest rate in the league behind the Cardinals. So Gabriel Davis will get his snaps and big play opportunity as well. But if Beasley were to sit, the direct slot pivot would be McKenzie, even though I know he's not going to score 3 touchdowns again. So that kind of mostly covers the Bill side. I don't think we can really get cute if you want it. It's a short slate, so maybe you take a shot on chasing a touchdown from Dawson Knox. Since that week 7 bye, the Colts are allowing 7.3 yards per target to tight ends. It's a touchdown or bust though if you go that route with Dawson Knox.
Yeah, I think there's so much to sift through on this Buffalo side of the ball. Like you mentioned John Brown, this team has just been firing all cylinders without him, and then you just add a guy like that who elevates an entire offense. He's shown that time and time again. I was just looking through some of the correlation stuff here, at least from this year. By far, the guy that's correlated at least the most direct to Josh Allen has been John Brown. Pretty small sample, but when John Brown is there and Josh Allen is dealing, they're doing it together, right? And Stephon Diggs right behind both of those guys. So it makes a pretty clean stack, in my opinion, especially if we don't get Cole Beasley in this game. Like you said, I think Isaiah McKenzie is right back in consideration. Some of the price tags on these guys are a little bit aggressive just because I think this game is going to be popular. Stephon Diggs is 7,700. But I think that on this side of the ball, getting John Brown at 4,700, depending on where you think his health is at. I know he didn't play probably a full complement of snaps last week, but he still seems like a guy that's drastically underpriced. So I think he'll be popular. I guess thinking of it this way, Reeves, because it's the first game of this Saturday slate. Is there anyone that you think might go a little bit under the radar on the Bills side? Probably not, right? It's probably, if you want to get different, it's going to have to be on the Indy side, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's probably where it's going to come from, and there will be options there too. I mean, obviously, Jonathan Taylor's going to stick out to a lot of people. He's had just a sensational, clip that closed the season. We've seen a couple of these running backs that struggled at the start of the year, like him and David Montgomery, kind of be guys we just leaned on every week to close the season in DFS. And, a lot of people will point to you and say, well, yeah, Jonathan Taylor, he had a light schedule the final 5 weeks. And that's not a lie. He did. But, the lights did come on for him as well. There were some pro things for Taylor himself that just weren't defensive related. First was missed tackles. I mean, he forced just 13 missed tackles through 10 games. on 135 touches, 33 missed tackles over the final 5 games he played of the season on 133 touches. He also had games where he missed Anthony Costanzo and right tackle Braden Smith. They both, in fact, missed the Steelers game where he still hit and had 2 touchdowns and 80 total yards in that game. So there's some still pros for him. And then if you want to talk about the matchup, Buffalo falls right in that line. Buffalo is arguably the worst run defense in the postseason. They just score so many points, they force teams out of the run. But they are 31st in the NFL in rate of runs to gain 5 or more yards against them, 25th in percentage of carries to gain 10 or more yards. They will give up splash runs. It just depends on if the Colts, as 6.5-point dogs, how much can they keep up that neutral game script for Jonathan Taylor. And if you think that it's going to be negative, then you just turn and look at a guy like Nyheim Hines. These short slates, you have to look at some of these ancillary like platoon players and almost predict game script. The night game has J.D. McKissick in kind of one of those spots against a team that allows no rushing production to running backs, but does give up the league high receptions, the Buccaneers defense, to running backs. So maybe a guy like McKissick is going to be more in play than he would be on a typical slate. So now if you think the Colts game script goes sideways, then Nyheim Hines is going to be a pivot. He's second on the team in targets while they are trailing. We've got Zach Pascal in kind of a weird spot. I mean, you say that like we would never play Zach Pascal, but on this slate we might. I mean, the Bills have kind of been a slot, wide receiver funnel. Over the past month, he's seen an increase in targets, 17.6% of the team targets the final 3 games of the year. He's got the 3 touchdowns. I mean, if your wide receiver 3 or tight end, it could come down to getting in the box to really swing things, or one of these cheapy guys that really objectively aren't great plays, but they score a touchdown or make a play. I mean, we'll probably talk about Miles Boykin as being one of those guys, but when you get on the Colts side, there are options. I mean, whether it be Pascal in the slot, T.Y. Hilton, the tight ends are just, a grab bag though. Like, I don't know how you really get through the triumvirate of the Colts, tight ends. I mean, they are just running equal routes. Jack Doyle, Mo Alley Cox, and Trey Burton. The Bills are not good against opposing tight ends. They haven't been. They run a base nickel, defense where they play 2 linebackers basically on the field the entire game. And they're 20th in yards per target to tight ends. But I mean, it's really hard to sort out which Indy tight end you would want to chase. I mean, Burton and Doyle have each caught 3 touchdown passes. They each have 4 end zone targets. There's really like no real clear signal. You just kind of hope maybe Trey Burton runs a wildcat one in again. They haven't done that for a few weeks.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a crapshoot on the Indy side, like on the very cheap end. I was hoping Nyheim Hines would be a little bit cheaper. Obviously, at 4,700, he's probably closer to where he should be at that point. But interesting overall. I think that it's still kind of odd, I guess, that the sharps are pretty heavy on the under right now. So I think I'll continue to monitor that. I wanted to shout out one person in the chat right now. Cody Perkins said he was a new sub last week, won over $1,300 on Sunday. Shout out to Cody. Let's go, Cody. Man. So yeah, if anyone's out there for the first time watching this video, toss a like on it. Let us know in the comments what you think about this mess in Indy. But let's move on, Reeves. We cut it down to 2 games and we're already behind, man. We do it every single time. But
fault.
No, it's not. The people love it, Reeves. People would I probably just go get a coffee and let you just talk about these games. But so game number 2, this is the first game of the Sunday slate. It's the Ravens, who are the 5 seed, at the number 4 Titans. So it's a 54.5 point over under. The Ravens are minus 3.5 point road favorites per blitzbet.eu. It's the highest total of the entire week. The Ravens also have the highest team total of wild card weekend. Another spot where the sharps are on the under so far. 71% of the money, only 30% of the bets. Obviously still pretty early in the week, but thoughts on Ravens Titans, Reed? This is gonna be a fun one to watch for sure.
Yeah, pretty interesting too that, we've got 2 games. I probably lean more towards the over on both of these games. We didn't talk about that in the first game, but if you look at the Colts and Bills against winning teams, the Buffalo played 7 games against teams with a winning record this year. So typically good teams. And their games in those games went 5-2 towards the over. And the Colts played 6 games against winning teams. They went 5-1 towards the over as well. So, I mean, I think that there's still upside in those games. Typically, when you get good teams, people predict the scoring to come down.
That's interesting because people say Josh Allen is so like matchup dependent that those games are still going over. So that's not actually what I would have thought, at least on the Buffalo side. So that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at Tennessee. Well, they've only had 3 games go under all season. Like their defense is it's just an abject disaster. I mean,
Yep.
it's one of the worst defenses in the NFL by far. These two teams played a 30-24 game in overtime earlier in the season. Think about this: they scored 54 points. There was just 5 total punts in the game, but there was 5 field goals. That game could have had 70 total points in it, easy. They combined for 730 yards of offense, and this is when the Ravens were still yet to fire. Like, we were still kind of in that kind of hot shot. Remember, this was the week that put them on COVID tilt. Their center played the game with COVID. Then everyone got, like, the outbreak happened immediately after this game. But these two teams combined just to punt 5 times when they played. We talked about the Titans defense is just a disaster. I mean, they don't get to the quarterback at all. They're 31st in the league in pressure rate. They're 30th in overall sacks. They closed the year 30th in passing points allowed per game, 18.7, 31st in passing touchdowns allowed. Does that really elevate like the Ravens? The Ravens are going to come out and do what they're going to do. It's not like they're going to come out and wing it if game script, doesn't dictate them to. They're going to play their game. It's not like Lamar's going to drop back extra amount of times just because the Titans are that bad, even though they probably could work it in more. But Lamar's been hot. He had 3 games through his first 8 where he scored over 20 fantasy points. He scored 6 of his final 7 games, 20 plus points. He's rushed for at least 50 yards in 9 of his final 10 games played, 80 yards on the ground in 4 of his past 5. So that ceiling is back. Then you look at the Titans. They're 23rd in explosive rushing yardage allowed, just under 60 yards per game. It's the lowest rate of any team in the playoffs, by the way. 54.9% of J.K. Dobbins' rushing yards have come on explosive runs. That trails just Nick Chubb as far as running backs in the NFL this season. So there's some upside there. The problem with Dobbins, though, is you just look at the overall touches, and he's out-kicking his opportunity by a good bit because he scored a touchdown in 6 straight games. But he's still sharing work with Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is still getting 10.8 touches per game over the past 6 games. If you look at J.K. Dobbins, I mean, his season high is 17 touches, which did come against the Titans earlier in the season. But I mean, he's had fewer than 15 touches in every game, but 2. He's getting by in those touchdowns. But we talk about the Titans passing game or pass defense. Well, Baltimore really only throws the ball to 2 players. Yeah. Marquise Brown is a 32.2% team target share over his past 6 games. And over Mark Andrews' past 6 games, he has 29% of the team targets. Tennessee closed the season 30th in catch rate allowed to tight ends, 30th in yards per target allowed to tight ends, 23rd in touchdown rate. Mark Andrews had a season high 96 yards against them the first time they played. Marquise Brown only caught 1 pass against them. It was for a touchdown. The Titans were 31st against opposing wide receiver ones on the season as well. That was the Soldier tweet game, I believe, for Marquise Brown. That was when he said the tweet after the game.
Yeah.
But with the Ravens, it's very easy because we know where the ball goes if you want to load up on them and on their side of the ball.
I think this game makes a lot of sense from that perspective because guys, if you are going to pair someone with Lamar, even mini stacks in this game, it's very condensed for the price tags. I think the Tennessee side of the ball is really interesting on this one as well if you're trying to get like somewhat different, just because I think that like the game script should definitely be in their favor. I think just because this Tennessee defense is so poor, I think that's kind of the biggest difference between these teams is the defensive side of the ball, like you said. But you look at some of these price tags, Corey Davis is 4,800. Like, I mean, if you need any more, I guess, evidence that DraftKings is looking heavily at box scores for their pricing. So we got 2 duds in a row, but Corey Davis had 11 targets last week. He only caught 5 of them for 39 yards. The week before, 2 targets. Drops a goose egg on us, but like those couple weeks before that, like he's shown some ceiling. He just seems really cheap to me. So I like that side of the ball. Jonnu Smith 3,200. So like there's some plays in this game to get some savings also. So I think this is going to be one, especially on the Sunday slate, where I'm going to try and probably not overstack it, but I'm going to have access to a lot of these cheaper pieces. So if you happen to hit on a Corey Davis at 50 or 4,800, or someone like I guess Willie Snead's been banged up, but someone Jonnu Smith 3,200, these cheaper guys, it can really set yourself up well for the rest of the slate. Is there, I guess, on the Tennessee side, Derrick Henry is very expensive, right? So he's 9,200. I'm kind of leaning towards the passing game in this one, and I think people don't realize, we always talk about the Chiefs as being like this really high efficiency team that can kind of speed a game up, but like Tennessee, like I think I'm not surprised that not many of their games have gone under this year, because they're the same way. They break off these big plays, and then it just goes to the other side of the ball and it speeds everything up. So I kind of like this game for points, obviously, but what are your thoughts on like Derrick Henry versus the Tennessee passing game in this one? They both seem pretty solid overall.
Yeah, a lot of people expected Tennessee to have significant offensive regression the way they closed last year, and they were still second in the NFL in points per drive. They were second in touchdown rate in the red zone. Just completely kind of rolled over what they were doing last year, throughout the course of a full season, and that's why they were such a high scoring offense. And the defense being equally as poor helped them out too. At least at the pace the opposition. But when you look at Derrick Henry, he's had two really good games against the Ravens the past two times that they played. But that Week 11 matchup when he had the 133 yards, Brandon Williams didn't play in that game. Calais Campbell didn't play in that game. He had the long run and overtime to kind of get him there. He's still maybe there's potential to be scripted out. Maybe it's just a record scratch. We come on this, do this show all the time, and we just talk about leverage all the time. And a guy like Derrick Henry, if he ends up not scoring a touchdown at that price, you're offered a significant amount of leverage, especially on a short slate.
Game number one, you're dead. That lineup's probably dead at that point, right? If he scores 12 points at 9,200 at 40% ownership or 30% ownership, the ownership's going to be really inflated on slates like this. So if you have some teams without Derrick Henry and he just drops a 15 on the board, you're feeling pretty good.
If he was playing on Saturday instead of Sunday, his ownership would just be insane, and it's going to be high anyways. But with having Kamara and Nick Chubb on the same short slate with him, it allows for pivots. True. But Saturday, the running back pool on Saturday is a nightmare.
Yep.
So, him being on Sunday might depress some of his ownership, but still he's going to be popular. And you just look at Tannehill. He had just through the start of the season, he had just 3 QB1 games through 9 games. Then he just turned around. He had 5 top 7 scoring weeks the rest of the season. One of those came against the Ravens. He's done well against good defense as well. So if you look at just matchups against those games, he's faced 5 teams this season in the top 10 in passing points allowed. One was the Ravens, who had a good game against. He averaged 30.2 rushing yards in those games against those good pass defenses, 10 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. I love Corey Davis in this game. We were on, I think it was a week, either last week or the week before, and I called him Tennessee Marvin Jones just because it's you just have to ride the wave. But when he does hit, he's hitting for you can win slates with the kind of ceiling he's shown.
There's a really large range of outcomes with him. He rarely is right in the middle. It's he's either going to drop 4 or 5 points or he's going to drop 30. And that's valuable. People look at that as a negative. I don't necessarily see that as a negative.
Yeah, the Tyler Lockett, corollary. But here's the thing about Corey Davis. So they've played 5 teams so far this season that are in the top 10 in points allowed to opposing wide receiver ones, which the Ravens are. And in those 5 games, Corey Davis has 3 of his 100-yard games. Teams that are really good at limiting the alpha target. Now, A.J. Brown still was fine against the Ravens. He caught 4 of 7 targets, 62 yards, and a touchdown. It's they completely shut him down. But it wasn't the Ravens aren't out here giving up 150 bombs to opposing wide receiver ones, which has allowed the door for some of these wide receiver 2s to be productive. And, Corey Davis, like I said, has had some of his best moments against teams that are actually really good at defending alpha wide receivers. He does have 2 duds in there still, the Marvin Jones way, but his upside moments have come in these spots outside the Detroit game where it would look like a tougher spot for A.J. Brown to get over, even though A.J. Brown's just such a different kind of beast and touchdown. He has so much touchdown equity that he keeps getting over. But Corey Davis is actually in a spot that kind of has had some signal to it that he's been kind of productive in these spots. And one of them was against the Ravens when he caught 5 balls for 113 yards. So I do love him a lot at his price. And the volatility on a slate like this, you do not care about.
Exactly. So I'll leave this open since you mentioned Boykin. Is there anyone that in this game in particular that you think could go super under the radar? Obviously, Willie Snead, he's questionable with that ankle injury still. So I don't know. I'm kind of struggling to find that true leverage spot in this game. So I think it's going to be super popular. But does anyone stand out?
Yeah, it's just the Titans defense is so bad that I just you just try to run into a bomb like you did last week with Boykin, something like that. You just have to catch a touchdown. The problem with I think trying to talk yourself into someone like Dez Bryant is even if he catches a touchdown, he's probably still going to be bad.
Yeah, the ceiling isn't even that very high. Yeah, I'm with you.
Whereas Boykin, at least maybe he does last week, it's a 40-yarder or something. You know what I mean? It's Dez isn't going to catch a 40 or 60-yard touchdown.
Right.
So maybe just getting a piece and attachment to just how bad that offense is, that defense is. Maybe Gus Edwards if you're going to get real cute, but with the Ravens, it's really, we know where the ball is going between those 2 guys, Brown and Mark Andrews. You can probably play them together, although you have to pay for it. But like I said, there's on a short slate like this, you're going to be kind of mix and matching and playing some of these ancillary guys like a Pascal or, an Isaiah McKenzie or something like that anyway. So, we didn't even talk about like guys like Cam Sims or guys that are available in the games after this too subsequently. But the Saturday slate in particular, the two defensive games seem to have the biggest signal are that Washington Tampa game and that Seattle Rams game, which kind of is just going to push everyone. If that Bills game tanks at 1, there's going to be a lot there's probably not going to be a lot of really live stacks like afterwards, right? Like I don't really think so. I mean, I think Brady will be the next popular stack on that slate, and then maybe Russ, DK, and Lockett, but that's just a complete mismatch nightmare against the Rams, who are by far the best defense against the deep pass in the NFL by a significant margin. So the Saturday slate, I think, is by far the trickiest, because the obvious play, the chalk, is at 1, like you said. And if it doesn't hit, like, what do we even grasp after that? What do we chase with?
You're kind of talking me into liking the slate a little more than I thought I did, because that makes me excited. If all the ownership's just going to be in the first game, you can kind of just figure out at least a different way to go. So in terms of the betting side, and we'll wrap on this, I still think that I'm on the Ravens -3.5 in this one against the Titans. I think they kind of exercise those demons from last year, and we didn't mention it before, but I like the Bills at -6.5 in that Saturday game. I think that it just comes down for me. It's just as simple as I don't think there's anyone that can stop Stephon Diggs, but also I'd rather just put harder earned American dollars behind Josh Allen versus Phillip Rivers at this point. So a favorite bet, Reeves, and then we'll wrap.
Well, I like the over in the first game going against the public. I think now that's gone down. I liked it at 52.5. I'm gonna like it more at 51.5, and if we can get it to 51 or so, I like that a lot. I also like the Ravens side. I think that this is a kind of a spot where they played them in the playoffs last year. They get knocked out by the Titans. This year they blow a game. They blow a 21-10 lead against the Titans. Blow it in overtime. I think this is gonna be a high motivation, kind of Ravens game. And I just think the Titans defense is just too bad right now. I think it's not even like an adequate spot right now to where I believe like they can just kind of hold the team like middle of the road. Like any good team, I feel like is just going to march down the field on them at this point.
Yeah, it does feel that way. So I think we're in for a pretty interesting week of football for sure. I love the wild card round. I think this is one where you see these teams make runs each and every year. I think back to like 3 or 4 years ago, my Cardinals were the 6th seed, make it all the way to the Super Bowl, basically a drive away from the Super Bowl against the Steelers. So who's going to be that team this year? So if you're watching this again for the first time, consider subscribing to the channel, toss a like on this video. Let us know in the comments, what player on the Colts do you think could be like that under the radar slate winner on this one? So make sure you follow Reeves on Twitter at Lord Reeves, myself at Joe Holka. Reeves, let the people know what else you got going on for playoffs, man. I know you guys have some free stuff going on.
Well, everything I'm doing is on the free side. So I've already written up these games. If you care about any more nuggets that I didn't drop on here, I wrote up all the other games that we didn't talk about as well. I'll talk about some values later in the week, but just all the fantasy stuff is just open now at this point. We'll be open throughout basically till August again.
Awesome, man. Well, first round's on me since we went way over today, but enjoy wildcard round, my friend.
My fault.
We'll talk to you soon. All right. Appreciate you.
All right, guys.